Welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell. I'm your host, Jonathan Evison. Every week we talk to someone new and interesting, somebody intellectually curious, somebody who will hopefully renew our faith in this cold, cruel world we live in. A Fresh Face in Hell. I remember being 10 years old, I guess, when the Jonestown massacre went down, and trying to get my head around those horrific events as a kid. I mean, seeing the footage from Guyana, all those bodies strewn in the jungle, kids my age, 900 people coerced into drinking that fucking Kool-Aid. It's been, 5 decades now, and I'm still troubled by this. The idea that rational thinking people can be blinded and manipulated to such an extent that they'd sacrifice their own lives because, weirdo two-bit evangelists in sunglasses asked them to. I don't need to remind you why this subject feels so relevant today, but 900 suddenly seems like a small number of people to drink the Kool-Aid. The truth is, I don't want to give MAG as much of my air today. I'm kind of sick of the subject, and I kind of rather escape it, to be quite honest with you. So today we're going to talk about a bunch of other cults, some more well-known than others, from the weird to the troubling to the absolutely horrific. Who is susceptible to their pull and why? Can we imagine ourselves being lured down some similar path? And what would it take? JW Ocher has made it his business to research cults. His book, Cult Following, The Extreme Sects That Capture Our Imagination, is something of a compendium of cults spanning the globe. And yes, the world is round. Or rather, I should say it's an oblate spheroid. It's not flat. So today I want to pick JW's brain a little more about some of the more compelling examples of belief gone wrong. So please welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell, JW Ocher. Jay, welcome to A Fresh Face in Hell. Thanks for joining us, man.
I appreciate the invite. This looks like it's going to be a blast.
Yeah. So, is it me? I mean, I know that America has a history of cults that stretches back before it was America. I mean, the Puritans were basically a religious zealot cult. But as I go over these and look at them, some of them have Indian names and in different languages. But is there a disproportionate amount of cultists that are American? I mean, it seems like, Jim Jones is in Guyana, but it starts in America. It just seems like, is it me? Does Scandinavia have a cult problem like we do?
So everybody has a cult problem. I think that's because it's a very human instinct to join a group of like-minded people beneath a charismatic leader. I think in America it stands out because our origins are so, Judeo-Christian that it's really easy. If they're extremely different from Judeo-Christian, they stick out. And then there's 1,000 bazillion splinters, Judeo-Christian. So every single cult has some connection to Judeo-Christian Christianity in America, but also across the world. So I don't think we have a disproportionate amount. I do think that that combined with our more capitalistic tendencies allows them to kind of set up better.
So, I want to talk about, you basically, let's define cults.
It's a hard one. You sure?
Yeah. Well, you have one that I sort of like, which is...
Yeah, so I came up with this one after I wrote the book and I put it in the intro or whatever, but it's basically a failed religion, which, some people don't like. And I've had some, religious groups that reviewed the book didn't like that very much. But the idea being that every single mainstream religion that we know today, Catholics, Protestant Christianity, all of them, they all started out as a small group of people that believe something weird, right? And then over time, they weathered controversy and problems and troubles and grew and spread until they became mainstream. So all these smaller cults that never get to that level, that's usually when we call them a cult, right? And they usually don't get to that level because they can't weather controversy, right? We don't find out about the cult till something bad happens, right? Till somebody's in jail or everybody's dead. And they were like, oh, those guys were a cult. But we didn't know about them before, right? So those are it's almost like natural, it's almost like survival of the fittest, right? Those cults that can't survive power and, all these things, they die. And the ones that are better adapted to society, they can grow over time until they're thousands and thousands of years old. So that's what I believe. I think academia almost also believes it that way. Some academics don't like the word cult because it's pejorative. So they use terms like emerging religion or new religion because, again, you don't know. You don't know if this group of, 200 people that believe something vaguely Christian-like could one day be set up and be a much more, stable, larger force. It's no way to know.
So you're saying it's almost always Judeo-Christian. The stuff doesn't come out of Well, Islam is, in a sense, Judeo-Christian too. Yeah, it's a branched off religion, but
Sure.
like we don't see this in Chinese culture or to the
We
same.
do. So they have their own ways. I say they speaking from the American perspective, it's Judeo-Christian. Like you said, Islamism is as well. They have their own, again, major religions, but you know, to be a cult, in fact, you don't even need to be religion, right? It doesn't even need to be spiritual. You can build a cult around dieting and healthy lifestyles, foot worship. I mean, there's like your whole
Chiropractors can be really culty, dude. I went to a chiropractor that was super culty. He was giving me like I hadn't even had my first adjustment, and he was giving me literature, and he asked me to do like a testimonial, and then I ran into a dude at a party that goes, "Yeah, I went to that guy. He has chronic back problems," and he goes, "Yeah, he was given this guy was a real cracker, and he gave him an adjustment. And the guy had a stroke in his office." So
Man, there you go. That's an intersection of, evangelicalism, meaning in the generic sense, meaning somebody really pushing their ideas, and also capitalism, right? Because there's a payoff at the end of that. So those two things together really help you form a group. But yeah, you can form a cult, and a traditionally described cult around anything. It doesn't have to be spiritual at all.
but you're right. I mean, it does tend to be a paradigm or a pyramid scheme, financially. Yeah. So they from David Koresh to breatharianism to Heaven's Gate, they all sort of follow the same paradigm, though, right? And you break this down in your book, in Cult Following the Extreme Sects, sects, that's
That's right.
SECT, not the usual
Although,
sects we're talking
although
about
there
on
is
this
some
show.
extreme sex in there for sure.
Um, Now let's go over those. Is there kind of like seven, right? I mean, isn't there seven or is there eight, like sort of sub, categories of this paradigm?
So mine was 7. So I try to pick out red flags, right? You're right. The paradigm is almost always the same. In fact, so this book has 30 cults in it, right? There are probably in the history of the world hundreds of thousands of cults. Even if you go active cults today, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. And I narrowed it down to like 60 at first to write the book, and then, but again, they do all follow the same paradigm. It's usually based around, one person has an idea that's usually not very original, honestly, but they have an idea. They start getting power. They start, separate. They start proclaiming themselves as different from other people, right? Very much different, right? The reincarnation of Jesus Christ or the smartest person on the planet. They start isolating everybody, either geographically or socially or however they can, so they don't have other ideas coming at them. Usually there's an abuse of power going on. And then my seventh is that they're really bad at naming themselves. They always have very boring names. They always sound vaguely, innocent and Christian, and just so they don't sound too weird. So the red flags are out there. By the way, those red flags are useless, because the reason why we join cults is we'll never get around that. But you can, from an objective, studying point, call out what are the basic elements of a cult. And honestly, those same elements apply to religions, except for, power behind a single person. That's why religions can survive, is because there's succession plans and there's multiple points up. They're too big to fail, right? There's multiple points of authority. So if a controversy happens to a mainstream religion, they just cut that part out and say, nope, that was bad, cut it out, get rid of it. The rest of religion stays the same. But if you're a group of 200 people or 500 people or 1,000 people, it's a lot harder to do that. Kind of, if your leader abuses power, you're kind of sunk.
Well, maybe not. Look around. So we're talking about so number one is kind of like a charismatic leader, but this is the beauty. Charisma is in the eye of the beholder, I guess, because I watch interviews with Charles Manson, I watch interviews with David Koresh, and Orange Julius for that matter, and I don't find them personally charismatic at all. I don't see the allure, but I guess to a drowning person, um, maybe it's enough that they just proclaim to be different.
The way that works, I'll tell you exactly how that works, is so the ability to be a leader, takes certain characteristics, right? You need the ability to make decisions under pressure. You need to have a vision. You need to have some confidence, right? But the characteristics of being a leader aren't rare. Tons of people can be leaders. We have leaders everywhere, right? Then they're not bad things. You need leaders. But then, so those people like that don't really maybe appeal to you as leaders, they can appeal to other people. Because again, we all have our kind of taste in leaders. We see that every political cycle, right? Everybody has certain tastes in certain leaders. Where they become more cult-like or cult leaderish is when they start proclaiming that they are unique among leaders, right? That's why most cult leaders will say that they are the incarnation of both Jesus Christ and the Buddha, right? Because they want to make themselves not just a great leader or a bad leader, not just a leader, but the most unique leader ever to come to planet Earth.
Well, kind of
So
the first tenetship of leadership, the tenet of leadership is somebody you like, who played a lot of sports and things like that, or is by example. But and yet these people are not leading by example. They're like, the same rules don't apply to me because I'm the son of Jesus and Yoda. You guys go ahead and drink the Kool-Aid. I'm just gonna kick back here and watch you do it. I just there's just such a huge disconnect for me here. I just feel like, okay, so we got charismatic leadership, then clearly there's a need for belonging uh amongst those. I mean, who these people are vulnerable always, right?
So I always say, so we when the cult blows up and it gets to the news level and we all know about it, right? Nixium or whatever, they get to hit the news. Usually what people ask themselves are, why were those people so gullible? And then they ask themselves, what would I be in that same situation? Would I be gullible enough to join a cult? We always ask ourselves that question. And what I learned doing the book is that's the wrong question. It's kind of a straw man question. The real question is, at my lowest point or at a low point in my life, will I say yes to help? And if your answer is yes to that, then you can be in a cult, right? Because all a cult is at the end of the day for people who are at a low point, and I don't mean a unique low point, low points that we all hit. They are just looking for help. And if somebody reaches out a hand, you don't question the hand when you're desperate. You just grab it desperately and get pulled into whatever it is. And it's a huge relief, right? You're not drowning anymore. You're not in a existential crisis anymore. You're not, you suddenly have friends. So that's what it really is. These people are vulnerable, just like but they're no more vulnerable than any of the rest of us. It so happened that in their moment of vulnerability, they connected with a group that for some reason appealed to them, either through a friend or just because it was in their neck of the woods or whatever. So I do. They are vulnerable. They are taken advantage of. But again,
So it's
not
the
in a
cult.
unique
It's
way.
the cult that usually finds the initiates rather than the other way around, more
Somewhat
often
true,
than
yeah.
not. Well, I mean, this idea of outreach. I mean, again, this is very big in Christian,
Yes.
particularly among evangelicals, or whatever JWs. Like, I mean, they're always outreaching. They're looking to find people. Then there's cognitive dissonance is just a huge part of this, right? I
Yes.
mean, I look at flat earthers and I'm like, dude, we've had the evidence of this for 5,000 years, probably much longer, and we don't know it. And they're still so, I mean, there's this idea that, like, if we're dumb enough, we still need to believe we're really smart, and so we believe we're so smart that it's like, here's this idea that's right in front of us. I can just skip all this, I don't have to go to school for 12 years. I figured it out with my common sense.
Yeah. So we want to be different. I think that's what that boils down to. Like, again, flat Earth is a really good example because it's not a smarter theory by any idea. It's not like one of those like, uh, but it is a different theory. And by believing that, by ascribing to that, again, you don't need to have any kind of education or non-education for that. It's just you want to believe something different. And even the mainstream religion, they all believe they have the ultimate truth of existence, right? That's kind of the interesting thing. They know the answer to life, the universe, and everything, right? And that makes you different if you have that information. So if most mainstream religions are saying the answer is whatever, Christ died, heaven, whatever, and you want to feel different and special, you'll believe something else, and that could be flat Earth, hollow Earth. It could be a different Messiah. It could be UFOs and advanced intelligences. You just want to believe something. By believing something different than those around you, you feel different. You feel smarter. You feel like you see reality more accurately. And I think that's all this is. Everybody trying to see reality the most accurate. And by doing that, somehow we end up seeing reality less accurately, because we want that ability to be right about the ultimate truth. You can put it this way. If all of us just said, I don't know all the time to the big questions you can't answer, there would be no religions. There'd be none of that stuff. We'd just be like, yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to go back to work today. And
That's kind of how science works. I mean,
exactly. Science
yeah.
says, good point. Science says, I don't know. If you can prove it to me, we'll put it in there, but it's still temporary until you prove something else. And then you kick that out with the next thing you know. That's exactly right. The basic tenet of science is, I don't know.
Yeah, skepticism.
Yeah, you're right.
So let me ask you this. I guess I did a lot of thinking about this when I was prepping, and like, what would it take? I mean, I'm not particularly vulnerable. I don't think I'm not lacking in confidence or a sense of belonging or anything like that. But if I had a weakness toward an ideology, I was asking myself, what sort of ideology would sort of draw me into the fold, it wouldn't be Judeo-Christian. I think for me, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. I'm certain you've given it thought, but for me, it would probably be something along the Nikola Tesla lines of like, frequency, vibration, kind of tying into like, quantum entanglement, this idea of being able to, because we know that we live in a, what, 10, 11, 12 dimensional, even though we live in a three-dimensional reality, we know that, I mean, science, cosmology and physics keeps pushing us further and further to sort of teach us that, yes, the universe is this big, vast thing that we measure in time and space, but at the same time, everything is happening all at once on a atomic level, and here we are, and that just seems so much easier. That just seems to open up the whole universe. And so, like, for me, that's where the answer lies. It's not exactly an ideology, it's an idea that this can open a door. And I'm sure religion does too. If you believe in Christ, your soul is saved. So, like, what is that for you?
So I'm a bit of a masochist and a bit of a curmudgeon and a bit of all the negatives. So I like it when ideas make me feel completely irrelevant. So most religions and cults are the opposite, right? They always want you to feel the most special on the planet, right? So if you're a UFO cult, you're one of the chosen that'll be taken away in the saucers. If you're a Christian, right, you have a direct pipeline to the creator of the universe. You have a God living inside of your heart. That makes you very special. I like the opposite. Like when you, so I kind of like the idea that we are an accident and like we're, on this rock for no reason, or, these new ideas around this entire thing is a simulation, a hologram. That really appeals to me. That we're all just this, like, not even an experiment. We're all just this like meaningless batch of stuff that maybe some other intelligence is gathering information from. Because in my view, in my like really kind of dark views, the ultimate truths of the world are always bad news. Like we never learn something new about humans or life, and we're like, oh, that changes everything. We're gonna be awesome. It's always like, oh no, we're always race to the bottom. We're always gonna die. It's always bad news. The ultimate truth of the universe. So
See, is my cult starting to look good though? Because you won't die. Energy never dies. In quantum energy never dies in the universe.
that's not what the
1995.
Koreans did, right? The Koreans in Florida, not David Koresh, but the Koreans in Florida, they believed in a creator, but they didn't believe the creator would make a universe so infinite that wouldn't make sense to the creation. So they made us hollow earthers that lived inside.
Oh, this is a Korshan unity people.
Yes, Korshan Unity, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were hollow earthers, but they believed that we are inside the hollow earth right now. Me and you are right now inside hollow earth. It's only 8,000 miles across, has a shell. All of the spatial phenomena, sun, moon, stars, they're all optical illusions, more or less. And that outside the crust of the earth, which is again 8,000 miles in circumference, China's like right there, is nothing, void. There's nothing there. It's not even space. It's just, pre-Big Bang, whatever, pre-time, all that stuff. Because again, a creator wouldn't be so cruel to its finite creation to give it a infinite universe. So you can now know God because you can know 8,000 square miles or 8,000 miles in diameter.
Why make it a globe at all? That's what I don't get it. Why is it? I mean, if we're not going to see the outside and there's nothing out of there, why is it round like the real Earth will?
It's a good question. The guys, I think because they can probably test it. They spend most of their lives. This is actually one of those cults that no abuses happen. They're very progressive. It's actually a pretty benign cult. They would always test because they want to make sure that the Earth was concave, right? So they always had this ways to kind of test. Kind of like flat earthers try to do with their tests. Same thing. They wanted to prove the Earth was concave. Yeah, concave, right? So that's kind of why they needed a sphere, probably. But also, for some reason, religions always gravitate to circles and triangles and stuff. So those were all like religious.
And they're not the first hollow. Or I mean, there's the reptile people. There's the guy, the Navy pilot that says he flew into a giant crevasse in the 20s or 30s or something and went to flat Earth.
Even fundamentalist Christians, if you believe hell is in the center of the earth, you're a hollow earther.
Korshan Unity is the name of that. Look into it. We'll probably put some links somewhere along the lines to some of these cults because you can really dig into them. I kind of wanted to, because you're basically like a compendium of cults at this point. So I wanted to just kind of do a greatest hits of cults.
Yep.
And we just talked about Korshan Unity. Let's talk about some of the other. Let's talk about David Koresh for a minute. Not that he's that's very Judeo-Christian. It's just another guy with a guitar. But what was the core belief there that was so all-consuming?
For David Koresh, so I actually put this in the book as a joke, but we left it in there. Like I told my editor, don't make me dig into their eschatology because it's so confusing. I think they are a branch of Seventh Day. No, they are. They are a branch. They are a branch of a branch of a branch of Seventh Day Adventists, and Seventh Day Adventists are
So
just
that Seventh Day Adventist three times removed, third
yes,
removed. That's
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
okay.
So there's basic Christian teachings, but their eschatology, what they believe about the future and the end times, is slightly different from other Seventh Day Adventists. So they're not that different from anybody else, from any other Christian sect, right? So their eschatology is so kind of boring. Like you start digging into it, it's a lot of Christ and end times and Bible and stuff you've heard a million times. And again, the only reason we know about them today is because of how they ended. If they had just kept going, nobody would care about them or their eschatology or any of that stuff. But because they went down in a fight with the federal government, a one-sided fight with the federal government, now we all know them as one of the top 5 most famous cults in America.
And they were getting pretty big. I mean, that was a pretty large compound. I don't remember how many people, if it was as big as Guyana, but
Yeah, no, it was as big as Guyana, but they also weren't like blameless. They had some, Koresh exhibited all of the tendencies of a classic cult leader, the abuses of power and those kinds of things, and they were stockpiling weaponry like, to illegal degrees. So they weren't like blameless, but they were sizable enough. In fact, I think they still exist today. It's all different, different leader, different people, but they were large enough to continue. Which, again, by my definition, if they keep going long enough, they'll eventually be a full-fledged religion.
they had a interesting take on child rearing and corporeal punishment. I know that.
They also one of the rules of a cult from my study, if it's a male leader, there will always be either sexual abuses or he will take all the wives. And Koresh did that. He enforced celibacy in all the males in his group. He took all of their wives because he was supposed to sire some new race of prophets. That was one part of his ideology. So again, that's one of those big flags. The rules of the group do not apply to the leader, right? It's two totally sets of rules. So that, yeah, they had some pretty icky stuff going on in there.
So, and he was probably an incel, right? I mean, I don't know anything about his dating record before that, but to aspire to that sort of, one would think, I mean, serial killers as well. There's usually they're not, they don't have a prolific dating life
That's a good
besides
question.
maybe
I think
Ted Bundy.
even those with good dating lives, if they get enough power, they abuse it. They just go overboard for some reason. And of course, if it's a male, again, it ends up being sexual abuse. If it's a female, it's other kinds of abuse. It's financial abuse and other things like that. But I don't know, for some reason, once you're at the top, you realize everybody says yes to you, you start asking for very extreme and extravagant things usually.
So on you didn't do Heaven's Gate in the book, right?
I
Why
did.
did you?
It was
Oh,
very
you
last
did.
one.
Okay, I couldn't
Last
remember.
one.
I thought maybe you. So this is very non-Judeo-Christian, and I know this is one popular culture knows a little bit, but just since we're going through some of the greatest hits of cults, let's go over Heaven's Gate a little bit. This is
Yeah.
it's a sect of UFO. I mean, UFOs are, like you said, there's Judeo-Christian and then there's UFO. Heaven's Gate was one of the more publicized.
Yep. And UFO cults, believe it or not, this was my biggest disappointment in researching and writing this book, is that most UFO cults are exactly the same. It's almost like in an infinite universe full of infinite possibility, you're hoping for something new or something grandiose. But generally, they're always, the Earth is about to go away for either climate change reasons or World War III or nuclear proliferation or whatever. And this bigger intelligence, this advanced intelligence is going to come and save the chosen few, pull you off the planet, and take you off to wherever, a new planet, a new federation of planets, all those science fiction things. And that's what Applewhite and the Heaven's Gate believed. They believed that their forms were only vessels, shells, that the real versions of themselves were not corporeal, and that one day this advanced race with a spaceship would come and kind of transport them all away from this planet, and the comet came. Was a Halley's comet? It just escaped me for 1 second there, but comet came and they believed that UFO was in the tail of the comet. So they all got together and they, committed. And the big knowledge that everybody has about this cult is that they all committed suicide together, and not in a Jim Jones kind of way, not in a violent mass, mostly murder. Jim Jones was not. The end of Jim Jones's cult wasn't a bunch of mostly suicides. It was a bunch of murderers, honestly.
But yeah, no, they've coerced people into.
Yep. Coerced them. They forced them. These were like aged people, children. So it was not, a gentle communion. However, with Heaven's Gate, it looks like, and we can't ever know really, but it looks like it was exactly that, a gentle communion, where they were all kind of laid out peacefully, matching Nikes in his bunks in California. They were, again, the most interesting thing about them to me, and they had a lot of body dysmorphia. At least Applewhite did. And he kind of pushed it down everybody else. A lot of body dysmorphia issues where they had genital mutilations and like all kinds of things, and they're all trying to be as androgynous as possible, but not like in a healthy way, right? They were just trying to they really were angry at their bodies for some reason. But the reason why they so stand out to me is they were the first cult ever that when I saw them on the news, because this is kind of contemporary to us. When I saw them on the news, I could go right to their website. This was a post-internet cult. So I could go right to their website, read their ideologies, see video from all the people that are now dead explaining why they were doing this, and have like firsthand information of this cult. Whereas Koresh, it all got filtered through the mass media. Before that is history books kind of stuff. But we could see what the Heaven's Gate believed right there because they were very much an online cult. They had one of the ways they made money is they built websites. They were a digital agency basically. So that and I think that the site is still up today. I'm pretty sure it's still up there in all its like whatever late 90s glory. So that was kind of what was most interesting to me about Heaven's Gate is less the UFOism of it and more the fact that they're so accessible to any of us to like learn about.
Claude Vorilhon, the realism friend.
Vorilhon.
Yeah, okay. So he claimed that he was a messenger for aliens called the Elohim who created humanity in a lab. And this is something, I've heard people believe this before.
Sure.
I love it. A bizarre twist was that the cult preached cloning, free love, and alien diplomacy.
Yeah.
What else do you know about them? They're still active.
Yeah, that's realism. Realism is super interesting. Again, what you boil them down to their basics. They're your whatever basic garden variety UFO cult. However, what they did, so Claude was he was a race car journalist, is what he was. And one day according to his story, he went up on a mountain, an extinct volcano in France. This started out in France, and just met an alien that came out of a silver craft, bell-shaped craft. And basically was told an ideology that turned the entire Bible, all the events of the Bible, into a science fiction story. So Genesis is actually...
Didn't the Mormons do that?
They did as well. Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, Scientologists did that. So in this case, though, all the events of the Bible happened in their ideology. It was started by, they were a cloning experiment. The devil and God, all that kind of, fighting between forces of good and forces of evil were basically alien bureaucracy. It was some scientists wanted to clone this way. Some scientists didn't think it was ready. So they used this barren planet that we call Earth these days to do their experiments away from their society. And then Claude got to like meet them more. Then they became kind of a hyper hippie cult. They're very much pro sex and pro anything about sex. Sex with aliens. Part of their mission was they wanted to set up star bases, basically bases on this Earth where the aliens could land, join humanity, and have sex. They were to set aside certain people, certain women, for the aliens to have sex with. But as you said, they are a successful cult. They are still around. They are still active. They go to their website. You'll learn all of their, all their activities. They do a lot of. They invented the kind of the nude protest or the topless protest. The free the nipple protest basically started with these guys because again they were super progressive about nudity and sex and stuff. And so most of their events on their calendar, if you look at them, they're pretty much just progressive sexual events, like protests at the end of the day. So it's, again, all wrapped around aliens.
But it's just, none of it's cogent. You would think in order to be an effective cult, your ideology would be very, very sort of tight and as foolproof as possible.
Yeah.
But,
I always
but
tell
it's
people
so convoluted.
I always tell people that what I'm looking for from a cult or even a religion really is to tell me something I have never heard before that would blow my mind. Like if you have a pipeline to the creator of the universe, and you have a pipeline to an advanced extraterrestrial intelligence, which they all kind of have something like that, you should be telling me things I can't figure out myself, right?
That's what my quantum entanglement cult's going to do.
Yes,
I'm going to say you can be everywhere at once, and I can get you there.
So realism,
1995, if you went in on the ground floor.
So realism, you even though they kind of reinterpret the Bible as a science fiction story, it's something most science fiction writers have done. Like it's not new ground at all, right? When somebody says the reincarnation of Christ, they're trying to tap into a tradition that's already there and be good to each other, eat healthy, whatever their whatever their ideologies are, I've heard it before, right? So for me to even kind of believe, you got to tell me something that blows my mind, which again, crush and unity, that kind of did blow my mind a little bit. The idea that we are actually in the center of a solid sphere, I was like, oh, I've never heard that or thought of that in my life, or breatharianism, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I assume. That one blew my mind too. I was like, wait, you can believe that? That was another one that was like a big idea.
So what made L. Ron Hubbard so effective? Because basically what we're talking about with realism, some of these, this science fiction angle on sort of the Judeo-Christian idea, what was it? Just great marketing? I mean, Scientology now you can't even call it a failed religion. I mean, it's so.
I'm glad you said that because when I do a lot of nonfiction books, and usually every nonfiction book, every sentence is in danger of libel, right? If you say something wrong, you're at risk. So at the end of all of my books, the lawyers come in, they read them, then they test me. Are you sure that you have multiple sources for this? Did you get their permission to interview? I go through all these tests. With this book, Cults, the lawyers came in at the beginning. They looked through my table of contents. They're like, no, because cult could be a libelous term. And Scientology was one where I had it in there. And they're like, they are a litigious group. You better not do that. And now I'm glad I didn't, because as I developed that definition, I'm like, these guys have survived a ton and are still standing. They might be on their way to religion status. I mean, they survived, besides celebrity whistleblowing. They were originally raided by the FBI back when they first started as a land-based religion in Clearwater, Florida. They were trying to take over Clearwater through ignominious means, got raided, got in trouble, survived that, still took over Clearwater just by legal means. They bought up all the real estate. But they might be, like you said, they might actually be a mainstream religion or pretty close to it one day.
See, and I don't really understand the kernel, right? I mean, I read part of Wright's Clear book, and I know a bit about it peripherally, but I still don't really understand the genesis story of it. Like what it's just the same as the other.
More or less. I mean, they have a belief that we are devolved aliens, basically, at the end of the day, and the all entire purpose here is to re-evolve into these transcendent beings, thetans, I believe they're called. And there's various ways you can go clear, or those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, that's partly what helps them. Like, usually the most successful religions are the most convoluted and not understandable, right? Biblical Christianity, it has tons
the Old and the New Testament. Trying to resolve those two texts is like what,
and they love that though, because that allows for faith, and faith says, this is bigger than you. You're fortunate to be a part of it. You're chosen, whatever, but this is bigger than you, and that's really what we all want. We do want to be part of something bigger than us, and if we can understand it, if your entire tenet of theology is, eat vegetables and be, be excellent to each other, right? Bill and Ted. That's not going to get a lot of people. A lot of people will say yes to that, but they won't join your group and live or die by your philosophy if that's all you have,
But it's so insidious once you join it. Like you can't.
Yeah, it can be. And, it's insidious, yes, but it's also kind of reflective of how we do groups in general. I always say, like, joining a cult is very human, right? It's a bunch of people that in want of something or need of something, joining with like-minded people who are become friends and loved ones under a charismatic leader that you believe. That's literally how we set up businesses and political groups and families and friend groups, right? So, and all those things can turn insidious, right? And the way it turns insidious almost every single time, maybe even every single time, is who's in charge. Are they good people that are in the service of the group? Are they trying to make this group better? Or are they just kind of soaking up power and egotism and are, that's who taints the group. It usually starts top down. Anything, again, families, politics, it always kind of taints them from top down. So that ability, that element of insidiousness that can creep into any cult is true of any human group that we form.
But you can quit Apple. I mean, you might think Steve Jobs is a god, but like once you're an initiate in Scientology, it's like they don't want you.
Yeah, and it's mostly psychological too, because like, for instance, Sullivan Institute, they were a cult in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They weren't even isolated at all, and yet they were able to hold on to people for decades. So there's a bit of
they're still going.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, they've definitely, since the leader fell off, they have, but they're still around. But there's something. I always say that when the internet started, right, suddenly that should be the freedom for everybody, right? If you're in a cult and you're being in the fishbowl, people are like, guarding the knowledge that gets to you. The internet frees you from that, right? You can get your access to any information you want. But what we found is that even though you have access to all truth pretty much anywhere online, the opposite's happening, right? We're forming smaller groups. We're believing more misinformation than we believe probably pre-internet. So something about we trap ourselves in these groups somehow a little bit more. So again, technically, the people in any cult could have just left. Very few of them are held under lock and key and assault rifles. But there's something psychological that they get tied into this and almost physically can't leave. There's a lot at stake, of course. If you leave, you have to admit, being wrong and changing your life and figuring out the next truth that you're going to pursue. So it's just super hard to join any group. I mean, I don't know if you ever try to drop a friend. It's really hard to do, or a family member, right? Try to drop a family member that is, not healthy for you. It's really hard to do. So
I've actually been pretty good at that. I don't talk to my old man. He lives like 12 miles away. I haven't seen him in like 10 years. I'm pretty good about compartmentalization. One of the more interesting and disturbing ones that I came across, and this is Canadian, was the Anthill Kids.
Man, that's the most disturbing one for me too. In fact, when we did this book, so mostly the topics I cover are usually strange, just strange, but strange and fun. Let's put it that way. Bigfoot, cursed objects, those kinds of things. So I have a certain tone that I write, a certain kind of nonchalant, jokey tone that I write with. And for me to convince the publisher that I could also apply that to a book about abuse and really just yucky things, I had to do a sample chapter, and I chose the Anthill Kids. With I forget his name because it's French.
It's Roach Thero or something.
Yeah, Roach Thero. It is the most violent. Again, it's not mass murder on the scale of Jonestown, but the individual cruelties are so intense and so
amputation of limbs.
Yes, amputation of limbs, burning, sexual desecration of corpses, the murder of children, all happening because this one guy, and this wasn't a band full of bad people, really. This one guy got so power hungry and drunk, literally drunk all the time, that he was just doing awful things. But it's also this is a Canadian cult, right? They're the friendliest people on the planet, according to all the cliches. But these were the worst. He isolated them. I like to use this cult as an example, though, because despite, again, amputation of the limbs, one of his girlfriends, he stapled her onto a table, or nailed it to a table, and then let it grow purple and die, amputated it. He cut one of her breasts off, he burned her, pulled teeth out, did all these horrible offenses to her. Yeah, awful things. And this is over the course of, time. Wasn't all at one time. Not that it makes it better. But after that, she was interviewed after he was put in jail. And she said, yes, he was awful when he was drunk, when he was doing surgeries. But other than that, he was a pretty good guy. And that rationalization is in a nutshell, every abusive relationship you've ever seen or been in. It's cognitive dissonance on a platter. It's rationalization.
Yeah, there's a name for that too, where you start to empathize with your oppressor.
Is that Stendhal syndrome? I forget.
Something like that. Yeah,
you're definitely right. Yeah. So human beings were programmed to do that. So you could just watch. Again, we see it in small versions when you see somebody in an abusive relationship. You take that abuse, but you always focus on sometimes they're good people, or sometimes they're really good people, right? They provide for me, they're nice to me, they do these things, and then sometimes they destroy me, right? And we can have both those. Again, cognitive dissonance is the ability to hold two things in your head simultaneously that are opposite. He's awful, destructive, criminal, gross. He's good, he's decent, he's providing. Those two things can live in somebody's head at the same time, and you can live your life that way. So it just makes you feel, again, as a human being, it makes you feel just how fragile we are, and just how not in control of things that our own brain can completely mutiny on us is just terrifying.
So we're talking about cognitive dissonance here. There are many Armageddon cults.
Yes.
That claim to know the day that Earth is kind of like the rapture, where it's going to, once the day passes, if you're going to do this, I guess you got to want to have it during your initiate's lifetime, right? So you have to have a real threat, but then you're also just putting a shelf life on your cult, you would think.
Well, the reason why I do that is you nailed it. It's urgency, right? If you're saying, hey, one day the Earth will end, probably in 2,000 years, nobody cares, right? If you're like, hey, in 6 months it's going to end, suddenly people listen. But we do this in politics too, right? Every political cycle, every election cycle, people get up there and they say, hey, the climate the Earth is being destroyed. Education is a mess. Crime is up and up. All these problems are rampant and destroying our country. If you elect me, I can solve it in 4 years or less, right? So we use urgency to kind of get our way. And that's exactly what those cults are doing. World's going to end. If you join me, you will be safe. Um, and yeah, but so my answer to that is I don't know why that happens. Why the day after those cults still continue to thrive. In fact, cognitive dissonance, as you know, came out of the study of a particular cult called the Seekers in Chicago. Like, we have that term because of cults. There were a UFO cult. When the UFOs didn't come the next day, they had 1,000 rationalizations why they were still the ultimate truth, right? So they had this, like, our leader said the UFOs will come today. The UFOs didn't come today, and yet they're still true. But I always just say, like, early Christianity, like, again, if you read New Testament, they thought that Christ was coming back imminently. They thought he was literally going to prepare a place in heaven and coming right back in weeks, in months. Like, Paul, the apostle, thought that Christ was going to be there any second. So, like, when he didn't come, they just kind of said, okay, he's coming someday. And then here we are 2,000 years later. He still hasn't come, but the religion is stronger than it's ever been in its entire life. So that almost somehow, like, that continued dangling of that hope is a strength of religion. This is one of the ways they keep going as well.
Interesting. Wow. People are weird. Breatharianism. That one was a little different, right?
Yeah, how life so Breatharians aren't one giant cult. What they are is like little groups that pop up every once in a while that believe the same thing. And this belief is that we don't need food, that food is actually a alien substance in our bodies. It actually hurts us. All the human body needs, the human body is so well created, designed, formed, evolved, that it only needs air, just pure clean air, right? If you can get that, you don't need food. Food is toxic. And how, again, this blows my mind because this is one of those things I would never come up with on my own, never heard of. It's not common. So it is one of those things that may be an advanced.
Pretty easy to disprove, right? Unless there must be something in the air. I've lost 50 pounds.
That's why it's so awesome. That's why it's so special. Like, the audacity of that ideology is immediately eye-catching to me. The audacity. Again, somebody from alien intelligence should be able to be pretty audacious in their truths, right? And this is an audacious truth. And not only is it audacious, it is, if food was not a problem in our lives, it would solve so much, right? We have such anxiety over food, how much we weigh, healthy food, bad food, processed food. If I killed food out of my budget, I would be a rich person, right? So it's so attractive as well to say, oh, food is not, suddenly no more killing of animals. Like, it just solves so many things to not need food. And yet, like you said, easy to disprove.
Well, it's demonstrably, like, that cult should last. How long did Gandhi go?
That's the cognitive dissonance, though. And over time, certain groups have, like, as the Breatharian cults have come and gone. In fact, the leader of one of the most popular ones, his name just escaped me as well. He was the one that was on That's Incredible, where he came on. He's a skinny black guy that could lift amazing amounts of weight. And when they asked him his secret, he said, well, I haven't eaten food in 17 years. He led a cult. He became famous for that. He started his own group, had followers, and then one day he was busted coming out of a 7-Eleven with like a chicken pot pie and a big gulp and like a Twinkie. And like, it turns out, once he was kind of exposed, everybody was like, yeah, his close people, his close leaders to him were like, yes, he also sits in hotels and just orders room service all day long, eats awful food.
It's so horrible, and his initiates are starving themselves. But didn't you have to renew the flock every now and then? I mean, the people were dying, or they were being weak.
Well, the thing is, it's hard to go without food. So it's almost like sinning, right? The Catholic Church says go without sinning, and then you go and you have impure thoughts and you are lazy. So we can't even morally say moral, right? It was always backslide. And that's what food is for Breatharians. It's backsliding. So, oh crap.
Oh, so then it almost strengthens their connection, because it's like, you're a sinner. You need us more than ever. We're going to get you through this. But everybody obviously cheated. Now, didn't one woman volunteer for an experiment?
She did. She was an Australian, and Australia 60 Minutes said, she wrote a book. It was this very famous book. And they said, well, why don't we do a whole show about you, and you will, not eat in front of the cameras for, I can't remember how long. It was at least a week, possibly 2 weeks. It was a long time though. And she's like, sure. She said yes to it, right? And so they started filming her, and within days, she was woozy and weak and pale and nonsensical. She was dying right in front of their cameras. So they had to stop it and go to the hospital, stick IVs in her. And it just, in days, she was proven wrong. But again, cognitive dissonance, for some reason she kept going. But she was responsible for quite a few deaths, because they found at least 3 people who had starved themselves to death with her book, within arm's reach. So it can be, again, as you said earlier, pretty insidious. It's not just this quirky, like, haha, you think you can live without food. It can, certain vulnerable people can try it to an extreme and die. So it's weird, but again, one of the guy who got busted in 7-Eleven, his initiates, they said, yes. Again, they're cognitive dissonance. They said, okay, yes, he was wrong. He was not a real Breatharian, but we know it works. We've seen people in India do it, and we know it works. So again, they were able to hold both his ideas and understand this guy who led us was dead wrong, but his ideas were right, at least, even if he was wrong. So, but again, it's one of those things that just, when I found that, I was like shocked. I was like, man, that is an audacious ideology.
Yeah,
Again,
pretty simple in a way.
yeah, that's almost one of it. That's almost one of his back. It's almost one of his problems. It is too simple. Just don't eat, and you will be better. It's almost too simple to disprove and follow.
So California is a magnet for cults. I mean, from Mount Shasta, which has got a million of them of their own, and then, down further south, Spawn Ranch. But another Southern Californian one I read about, I just love the name, the Source family, Father Yod. Tell me about Father Yod.
This is your classic hippie cult. The hippies. So the hippies, particular, and that whole era of counterculture was very, very much vulnerable to cults because they rejected the entire system. Right? They're like capitalism and the war machine. We're rejecting all of American society, but when you reject something, you got to replace it. That's always kind of the other side of it. And so the hippies were constantly looking for. That's why a lot of people went to India and kind of adopted those ideas over the Hinduism and those kinds of things, because they were looking for something to replace the whatever industrial war capitalist machine. And Father Yod was your classic hippie. He opened probably the first vegan in American history, in California. So he had a vegan restaurant. He loved drugs, acid, all those things were a big part of his life and his ideology. And he was in a rock band. So he was like all those things you think of. And I think these guys, and again, might be speaking out of turn here, but I think they were also relatively benign as far as, they didn't end in like tragedy, or abuses were never really uncovered. And I think they're actually still active. I think as early as the 2000s, they were writing books about, memoirs about their time with Father Yod and the Source family. But again, exactly what you think of as a classic 60s cult, Father Yod and the Source were. Until his death. I think he died. He tried to hang glide without any training. Just one day tried it with no training, no instructor. Just like, I'm going to try to hang glide off this 1,300 foot tall cliff. Didn't work very well and died like 9 hours later. And at the age of like 52, he was pretty young.
Well, why did it take him 9 hours? Oh, because he crashed and then it took him.
Well, he had no apparent injuries. Apparently it was all internal. So there wasn't anything externally wrong with him, but he had like hemorrhaging and stuff inside. So like, just didn't get to him in time. But again, his people lived on, and again, because it was such that ideology. Even today, I look back at like hippieism, and I'm like, man, it feels like that was the last time we were real as a people, right? When we were interested in music, where music was important, and like trying new substances because we just wanted something different and new clothings and new, like, that just felt like, again, at the end of the day, it didn't work, but at least it was an attempt, right? So it's still, to this day, to me, kind of appealing.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to wind down, but I want to, you've got an encyclopedic knowledge of all this stuff. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to here in closing to, pick, tell me about one of the most, what you think, is the most fascinating cults. Maybe we've covered them a little bit here, or somebody we haven't talked about.
Yeah. So my favorite I always bring up the Christian unity and Breatharianism, but one of my favorites is I'm looking up real fast because it's a Japanese name, so I want to make sure I get it right. Aum Shinrikyo, right? Aum Shinrikyo was a doomsday cult. It was in Japan. It started out, the guy who started was blind, and he had kind of an herbal medicine practice. He started again in very benign roots. Believed the end of the world was coming. Believed it was going to be World War III. Keep in mind, this is Japan. They had got the brunt end of World War II, right? They were scarred for this to this day, right? So they thought, the idea that World War III was coming, a nuclear holocaust was coming, was very, very much believable to many Japanese people. But when the World War didn't come, what they did is kind of try to make it themselves. So and this was a large religion. I think they were at its peak, is anywhere between 20,000 and 50,000 people. I think their net worth was like $1 billion because of course, all cults start businesses as well to fund themselves. But they started making trying to use bioterrorism. They hired scientists in the cult to try to make botulism and Ebola and various bio various things that cause weapons of mass destruction on a bio level, and they killed people. They would commit assassinations. They did this giant terrorist attack in the Japanese subway using sarin gas. So they had developed this gas weapon that worked.
That was in the 90s. I remember that.
Yes, exactly, in the 90s. And I even heard somebody tell me the other day that, like, right now, if you go to Japan, there's not a lot of trash cans because trash cans were kind of where they hid these packages that kind of exploded. But fortunately, they were really bad at they were bad at bioweapons. Like, their sarin gas wasn't as effective as it could have been had they, learned how to process it better. So it could have been much worse had they been better at their weapons. But they were good enough to hurt a lot of people. So the idea of bringing about the end of the days when it doesn't come is very unique to this group. It didn't happen. It hasn't happened a lot. Most of the times when the end of days doesn't come, again, they adjust. They change the end date. They pretend it already happened, and we are in the end days. But these groups became not just a cult, but a terrorist group. So they were both those things, making them, again, the level of insidiousness just rises off the scales at that point. So they're a very interesting cult. Once you get into them, you have to get into like the culture of Japan at the time, and it opens up a whole world of that you don't quite get out of a Judeo-Christian cult.
I mean, I was trying to get through a whole show without talking about it, but we got to talk about the MAGAs just a little bit because, I mean, do you consider that a cult?
So we tried, again, I wanted to play a lot with the word cult when I started the book, so we wanted to try applying the word cult to like QAnon and those kinds of groups. Just does it fit, right?
Because like isolation doesn't fit, because that's usually one of the things, the tenets of a cult is to sort of often geographically isolate them. But these people are everywhere. I guess they're mostly isolated.
The way you can also isolate is through information sources. So one of the cliches of people who, are MAGA or follow or are part of Trump or proponents of Trump, they very much focus on certain news sources, right? Also true of the other side. I have to say that as well, right? Both sides focus on very specific news sources, which is a form of isolation, right? I will say with Trump, one of the flags he does fulfill for me. I'm not saying he's a cult leader or anything like that, but he does have a habit of really aggrandizing himself, right? He says, he's
always the hero of his own story.
Always the hero, like always the biggest. Smartest.
That's not a charismatic. Anybody, when I meet somebody who's the hero of their own story, I just like, oh, get away from me. I mean, that's
he has leadership tendencies. He has leadership tendencies, obviously, but he goes above that to saying I'm unique as a leader, which is that's when you gotta like stop and say, wait, you're just a dude we elected. So like what that's all you are. Like let's start there. So that's one of his flags. But again, most political groups these days, for some reason, we get so extreme with politics, do fulfill a few of my flags for being or at least tending toward cultism. Let's put it that way. Because again, in the weakness of my definition is you can't really prove it to be a cult until it fails. It has to fail first, and then it's a cult, right? So that's kind of a weakness I have in trying to play with that idea and apply it to different groups that aren't as obviously a cult as, say, Jonestown or David Koresh and his group.
Well, there's this idea. Here I go. I'm just keep going. I'm just trying to wind down. But there's this idea that when the cult, gradual indoctrination, like you don't go out and hit them over the head with your whole idealism at once. In fact, most cults start with what we call love bombing, right? I mean, it's just like this person is vulnerable. Look, we're your family. You can depend on us, and love bombing. Like how did we get how do we go so it just seems like 0 to 60 pretty fast, from love bombing to just this, like MAGAism is basically sort of like they've perfected the art of just bitterness. It's just like bitterness is a way of life. Like it's not about Donald Trump at a certain point. It's about the hatred put towards the lib and owning the lib and like it doesn't yeah.
Yeah, not to get too deep with you, but like part of that is the problem of a two-party system, right? We can other people really easily, right? In a two-party system, it's very not nuanced. It's us or them, and at some point, for some reason, it's always been us or them with politics, the two-party system. But at some point, it's been like we've turned it almost like you said. I think you're going this way. Turned it religious. We're the good guys. You guys are evil, right? And then once you other somebody into evil, you can do whatever you want to them, say whatever you want to say, treat them however you want to treat, because they're evil. They're not just the opposing party with different ideas, just as human as you are. They are extremely other. And all political parties, especially in two-party system, are, at risk of being this way. But that's what's happening is the other side has become the devils. The devils. We're the angels, they're the devils, right? So anything's excusable if you're taking it on the devils. I think that's the issue right there for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know, when like protections for marginalized people became evil, that talk about cognitive dissonance. Oh, well, we're not going to open that can of worms today. He is JW Ocher. Check out he's written many books. He's into cryptids too, which it took a lot of, I'm a big Bigfoot guy. So it took a lot of, that's for a different show. But the book we were talking about today is Cult Following, the Extreme Sects That Capture Our Imagination. He is JW Ocher again. JW, thanks for being our fresh face in hell today.
No, I appreciate it. This was a blast, man.
Thanks, bud. A Fresh Face in Hell with Jonathan Evison is brought to you by Fresh Face Pods and produced by Jason Botkin and yours truly. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, or at our website at freshfacepods.tv. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for updates and special content. And if you love the podcast, by all means, run out and buy all of Jonathan Evison's award-winning novels wherever books are sold.